Hey guys, I'm Rachel with Restorations by Rachel, and in today's video I'm going to be redoing a French Provincial set. It's a dresser, nightstand, and mirror, and I paid $80 for it, and honestly I feel like it almost should have been free, as dirty as it was and as bad as the paint was coming off. But you know, this is a kind of a newbie lesson I feel like I learned to avoid a piece like this, unless I'm just wanting to spend lots of hours stripping and sanding and everything. But I think it turned out absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait for you to see it. So let's get this going. All right, y'all, here she is. As you can see, it is in pretty rough shape. A kid must have had this. There's lots of stickers, and then you can see a layer of paint with a peeling layer of paint. You know, I've already applied some stripper on top, so that's why it's bubbling. But yeah, you can see there's glitter paint on handles. It has been through a lot. At least the interior of the drawers are in good shape and really beautiful, but you know, it's pretty ugly. So this was the star of the show. I mean, look at that nasty, the sticky pet hair. It's so gross. So it's time to get to work. I started out with stripping it. I didn't even clean it off because the stripper would cut through it. You can see on the drawer fronts and the top that, you know, I've already stripped and sanded that down. I didn't record it for whatever reason, but you're going to see me doing the same process on the rest of the dresser. I'm using Clean Strip Premium Stripper and just applying it really generously. And you can see even as I'm working that it already bubbles up. The stuff works really fast, but it is pretty toxic. And even while I'm outside, I'm having to wear a respirator. So after about 15 minutes, it's ready to go. I'm just using a multi-tool scraper to scrape it off. And, you know, it's just a process of doing this multiple times, unfortunately. This latex paint on top comes off quite easily, but, you know, there's more layers, and it's just going to continue to be a pain in my backside because this one was a lot of work, and I honestly regretted buying it in a lot of ways. But I think if you stick around, you'll see it turns out really pretty, but goodness, it was a lot of work. Okay, so finished with round one stripping. So you got a lot, but you know, basically all that, the white off. There's some kind of yellowy brown gunky stuff, I'm not sure what that is. And then there's a gray under there, and so I'll put another layer on here to get this gray off. And then I'm also going to, like, you know, here in the nooks and crannies first, I'm going to use this Green Ease. It's a finishing cleaner. It's supposed to be non-toxic, better for the environment, so that's nice. But then I'm going to use that. It helps really clean up like any residue or little bits of paint that are still on there. So this round, where I'm just in the little nooks and crannies, I'll use my little wire brush, but then you can come through with steel wool and scrub it in, and it works really well. So I'm gonna get to it. We have to go kind of gently because this wood can tend to get roughened up pretty easily with this brush. I might actually grab this one's a little bit softer. But it's loosening up this extra bit, and I had put some stripper on this just earlier and dry it on there. I forgot to come through and try to brush it off, but this stuff's working pretty well. So you can see how much it's taken off. And it's really nice for this detail area because this can be hard to get off, and then if you're trying to sand it, it can really, like, you can burn through the veneer very quickly, and that's a big bummer. So I'll come back do that again, but you can see it's a lot of progress. So as you can see, I'm going through this again. And one thing I hadn't mentioned yet is that after I revealed the beautiful wood grain on top of the dresser and on the drawers, I was thinking, okay, this could look really pretty with a paint wash. It's currently pretty popular look, and it would still showcase this beautiful wood grain. And so that's what I'm going for. I ultimately don't do that, because I later found out that I had burned through veneer on several of the drawers, and then it would have required even more sanding than I ended up doing. Now I'm working on the nightstand, and I'm just doing the same process. I've applied the stripper, and I'm using the all-in-one tool to scrape it off, or paper towels. Basically just trying to figure out a way that works best around these curved areas. You can also take like a handheld brush and scrape off at those areas, but I didn't have that for this time around. All right, so I have stripped this as much as I'd like, and I'm going to take my orbital sander to this side to the flat areas, and then I'll put a squishy foam pad either on my orbital, or I'll use my Surf Prep sander and get these areas that have some curve and angles to them, because it just is gentler and works better along those surfaces. But here is how the nightstand looks. Still has plenty on it, but I'm just gonna tackle it with the sander and see how it goes. Here's a bit of a bummer. I burned through the veneer, so I'll have to repair that. And I didn't realize it was quite so thin. And with it, sometimes this isn't completely level, and you can just burn through it without realizing. So I was trying to be careful, but it happens, and I missed it. So I'll be extra careful now right around this area. And also, I just want to show you, you can see these cracks. Once I get it, sanded, I was going to say I was going to caulk it, but with doing the paint wash, I'm not sure. I'll have to think through that, through what I want to do here. So it might look better once I have all this, this paint gone and sanded away, but we'll see. For curved surfaces like this, it's just basically trying to utilize things that you have. I have a foam sanding block here that I have covered in an 80 grit sanding disc, and I'm just trying to get over the surface, and in the corners I also have a contour sanding kit that I use a lot, that you can wrap sandpaper around, and you can see it there. And you can get into, certain contours of a piece. It is very tedious work. There is just no getting around it, unfortunately. But, when you have a vision in mind, you just got to keep reminding yourself that it will be worth it. And, hopefully it does end up that way this time. It did, thankfully. But, you just keep whittling away. So I also have this nice little gadget here. It comes with different attachments. I don't have it out here in the garage right now, but it's a nice, scraper for, getting some of it out here, and then I can go in with, the sandpaper and the little attachment for the detail here to get what's left. But you can see I kind of started something, you do want to be careful with, just because it can take out a chunk of something without you realizing it. So it's not something you just want to go hog wild on. But you can see it's getting a nice little layer off, and it's nice to have less that I have to sand. So pretty cool little kit. I can link that too, but I don't remember it being too much money on Amazon. Okay, so here on these curved areas between the drawers, I put a foam attachment onto the surf prep sander. You can see that it's obviously a circular one, but I ended up doing this because I kind of liked how it would curve up around all the edges as I was going, and it worked well. Switching gears a little bit, I'm going to tackle the hardware. You will notice that it is no longer covered in sparkle glitter paint. I had tried putting a gold spray paint I love over it, but it just didn't look good. So I am putting it into a half and half mixture of vinegar and water, and then simmering it for 15 minutes to get everything off. All right, so I have the hardware, and it was boiling in the water and vinegar solution. You can see the paint wants to peel off really easily. So for that first step, just use this brush, and it's peeling off real nice. So I think the sunlight, you can see it even better. Like how beautiful that is. As much as I wanted to ignore it, I had the mirror still to do. I ended up taking off this decorative piece on top because, as you probably already noticed, I also took off the decorative pieces on the dresser and nightstand. Okay, so time to sand. I'm just using a foam attachment for my orbital sander. It's really great for all those curves again, and I can link the ones that I've bought in the description, but they're really great for curved surfaces. You do want to be careful with your orbital sander because even with it being a foam attachment, it can start sanding more away than you want real quick on you. My sander does have an adjustable speed, which is really good. So you can, if you're on a curved surface like this, you can adjust the speed down to where it won't sand off as much at a time. They just weren't quite the look I was wanting to go with. For the top, I am using a foam pad on my surf prep sander. I will later regret not taping off the mirror part along those edges because unfortunately I scratched it. And, this is something I'm learning, making these mistakes like burning through the veneer on the drawer fronts. And, as much as I'd like to hide those, it's just part of it, part of the learning process. And hopefully you can learn from my mistakes without committing them yourselves. Some of the areas I couldn't quite get with the electric sander, so I'm coming in with my detailed again, sanding some, using my vacuum to vacuum up the dust, and then sanding again. So, more sanding. For the nightstand, I'm just going through the same process with the foam attachments on all the curved areas. And at this point, I have decided to paint it, so I know it's not going to have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get it smooth to where when paint goes on there, you won't see any lines anywhere. I had to make some repairs where I pulled off those decals, so I just put some Bondo in there, and I'm using my sander with a foam pad again to smooth it out. An idea I considered was doing a paint wash on just the tops of the dresser and nightstand, and then painting the base. And so here I'm testing that out to see what I think it looks like. And I don't measure it out too well, but I'm doing about 1 part paint to 4 parts water, and then you just mix that up and brush it on there and then wipe off the excess. I ultimately decided I did not want this look and was just going to paint everything. But this will give you an idea of the process of what you'd do if you did want to do a paint wash. All right, remember that nasty drawer in the nightstand? Well, here I am trying to work on it. I first took a sander to it. Well, I guess I first wiped it down and then I took a sander to it to help get some of that residue off that was still in there. I'm also sanding down the side to get the black off and just make it look nice so I can get the liner in there and then put the wood conditioner on. One last fix to make is caulking where there are the cracks on the side. I use this fast drying caulk. It is paintable within 20 minutes. And so I'm just putting a small bead down along the line there, and then I am taking my finger and smoothing it out. You can also take like a baby wipe, I have a damp paper towel there that I'm using as well. You do want your finger to stay wet because it glides more smoothly on there and keeps the caulk from drying so quickly and balling up on you. All right, I cannot believe it. It is finally time to paint. You will probably notice that I did not prime it. This paint that I'm using, it's melange paint. It does not require a primer or a top coat. And, I prefer to, especially with a top coat, not do that if possible, because I'm sending along some touch-up paint if they happen to nick it anytime. And if you do have a top coat on there, then it'll look funny with the change in sheen that you would have against the top coat. So since I found this to be very durable without a top coat, I'm just putting the paint on there. But, going back to the primer, it bonds well, especially where I've sanded well to ensure proper adhesion. And I've been really, really happy with this paint. It is a little pricey, but when you're not having to do the additional step every time of the primer and top coat, then it works out really well. Okay, so here it is in daylight. I was pretty happy with it. I did have to go. I found some spots that needed to be filled, and so I did that. And you can see I've sanded down the top smooth so I can get another coat on there. I also noticed that I did not caulk here yesterday, and I don't really like those cracks. There's a real minor one here. See areas that need to be sanded, whatnot, but I'm gonna get both corners here. This one's not quite as bad as that first one that I showed you. So changing gears a bit, I'm working on the mirror now. I decided to prime it because I was just concerned, since, I'm spraying on raw wood, that it's going to absorb that paint quite a bit. And I was concerned that I just had a quart of paint and whether or not I would have enough to do everything with the amount of coats I needed to. So I'm just using it, and it had great coverage. I barely used any product and worked really well. And I went with the gray here because that's good for under a dark color. All right, so it's time for a second coat. I've lightly sanded it down and then wiped off all the dust. Here I'm just starting at the top and making even, passes, and I'm overlapping by about 50 to 60% on each pass. That gives you really good coverage. And my method is to do the top, and then I will go and do like all the edge that's kind of, right along the trim. That way later, if I am, spraying that, then I wouldn't possibly be blowing specks up onto paint that's already dried some on top.
the hardware, I cleaned them up, but there's still, like, I know I saw someone talking about brass-plated copper, and I think that this is what this is. You can kind of see the copper coming through, and I just don't like that look. So I'm gonna try taking this and putting it on here and just seeing how it looks, and I'm hoping it will get the look that I'm imagining.
So I'm just taking my foam brush and dipping it in the paint and then touching up the areas where I didn't quite like the coloring. I'm not going for this to be all over the piece, but more just as kind of like a little accent and to even out the tone of the pools. Just doing some touch-up things. When you shut the drawer, sometimes it'll go in a little bit further, and this little edge along here would show. So I'm painting it, and then I'm gonna paint some here so it will all be the same color and it won't just be raw wood that's coming through. And sorry for my kids Dude Perfect screaming in the background. After getting that touched up, I add the drawer liner and then condition the wood with Howard's Feed and Wax, but find that I have one more thing to do.
So I am basically finished, and I don't want to show you too much of it before you see the final rebuild, but problem I found with these two middle drawers is that they want to rub up just a little bit. So I'm planning to take my sander and take off a little bit at a time until I can get it to close without rubbing up against each other, because eventually that would just rub off this paint and not look very good.
So I'm just taking my sander at 120 grit and going slowly across the top, taking little by little off, and then I'm going to try it out. You'll see that it does not quite work the first time, and so I go do it another round and finally get it to what I'm happy with. So as a reminder, here is where we started, and here it is at the end. I'm really proud of this one. Goodness, it took way longer than I wanted it to, and I've learned a good lesson from that at least, but it was a lot of work. And this color too, is out of my usual comfort zone, but I really love the contrast of it with the hardware. I was afraid with the color that it would sit for a while, but someone ended up getting it for their baby girl's nursery, and I think it will be a perfect fit. What about you? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're not already subscribing, I'd love for you to follow along. Thanks so much for watching.